All right, we are up and running. Esenia Cassidy, welcome.
Thank you, Yoshi. It's great to see you.
Yes, long time no see. We just had a nice chat at the Borealis Psychedelic Science Summit. You see, I've said it so many times now. The Borealis Psychedelic Science Summit in Stockholm. It's like a phrase that's stuck in my mind now.
Right. Yeah, I bet the brain cells are wiring together and firing together after you said it so many times. It must be easier for you to say it. But then I guess you won't have to say it for some time. Is that correct?
Probably won't. Yeah. No, I won't. but now I feel like that's what I'm supposed to say. Yoshi from the 2025 Borealis Psychedelic Science Summit in Stockholm.
You still are. Speaking about identity and how psychedelic experiences, whether directly or otherwise, I don't know about otherwise, but directly psychedelic experiences, help accept or reaffirm certain parts of identity, as the science tells us. So it makes sense that part of your identity would be particularly salient right now.
Yeah.
I'm taking it the scientific track immediately.
I like it. So you and I met at the summit. You are from the US and a psychedelic researcher.
Yes, I research psychedelics at the PhD level at The Ohio State University in the US. And before that, I did similar things at the New School for Social Work in New York, where I also co-founded the Psychedelic Humanities Lab, where we sort of try to broaden the inquiry or maybe like pivot away from the, common medicalized lens of psychedelic research to sort of ask maybe more humanities related, less medicalized questions, such as what is the meaning? What is the point?
Yes.
Who is in the room? Who is not in the room? Can people be harmed? What can we do to avoid that? Like a great variety of questions.
Right.
So the psychedelic humanities lens is definitely very dear to me.
I bet. So let's start from the beginning before we get to the psychedelics, because I've talked so much about it now this weekend. Did interviews with 22 people.
Maybe slightly sick.
On the topic of psychedelics. So now I'm like, all right, let's do something else. Tell me like where you're from. I know you live in Ohio. Is that where your story began, or?
So I was born on an island, on a Pacific island called Sakhalin, north of Japan.
Cool.
Where I grew up for the most, I would say, I think I grew up there if you count up until 18, I think that's what happens. Yeah. It's like a very nice, unique island. It's very Pacific. Japan is very close, yet we didn't go there a lot, but like you could see the northern tip of, Japan from like the southernmost cape of my island. It's very nice. I miss it. It's a great island.
Is it a part of Japan?
No, it's a part of Russia, but it used to be, so back in the day, it used to be more, what do you call it? It's like it used to be closed. You couldn't visit it because I think there was some military, I'm not sure. Like there was like some restrictions of who could visit. You could only visit the island if you had family there or if you had a job there. Since then, it became just like any territory and doesn't have those restrictions. But it's, I think it's nature, it's prominent feature, and also the like oil gas resources that's happening actively and has been for I would say maybe about 30 years, like oil gas on the shelf. And they were Western companies earlier, oil and gas companies, and now I think it's all Russian companies. I haven't kept a close look for a while, but it's a great place in terms of like nature is very unique. It's like very Pacific. The history of the island is so unique that half of it was Japanese for some time, and Japanese used Koreans as laborers. So when Japanese left in 1945, a lot of Koreans stayed and assimilated. So we have like a mixed population. It's Russian, Korean, and it affected culture, influenced, common foods. For example, like very common, like traditional meals are essentially Korean recipes made with unique plants and seafood and whatever else we have growing on the island. So it's like a very special place, essentially.
Oh, sounds very unique.
It definitely
Cool
is, yeah.
mix. How long did you live there?
So I lived there most of my childhood, I think up until I was 18 or something like this. And yeah, and I missed it. And I've visited every now and again. Now I haven't been there for a long time. Yeah, and I still have some like friends there, people I went to school with. Yeah. And I've been in the States for most of my adult life, essentially. And while I was doing that, before I got into psychedelics, my main career was media. So I was in journalism for a long time, and then some documentary filmmaking. And when I did journalism, it was more like arts and culture oriented, with some society and politics sometimes, but mostly arts and culture. And one of the things I did prominently is interview Hollywood stars, Hollywood directors. When the films would come out, there would be like these big junkets, and I would get to interview essentially cast and crew, directors, sometimes producers of those films, which was really interesting. And I think, so that was before I went to school, back to school for psychology, but I feel like a lot of psychology happened there because you have to build rapport, you have to build quality rapport instantly in order to get a good interview under severe time constraints, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
that was very interesting.
You said you were making documentaries, or is that?
Yes, towards the last part of my career in media, I got into documentary filmmaking. I was part of the Pussy Riot documentary with the HBO. I was associate producer there. So that had big success. It was shortlisted for Oscars. Or was it longlisted? I can't remember. I think it was shortlisted, but didn't make it to the whatever. Like it was affiliated with Oscars and got a bunch of other awards. And of course, the whole Pussy Riot movement and lots of events were held throughout those, I think, 2-3 years when they can like really peaked in the sort of world's culture, arts, politics scene. And then I did a bunch of documentaries on my own, set in Colombia. So I think actually I did 2, and one of them was set in Colombia. It was about this female coca grower who is in a very like remote part of Colombia, and essentially the only not even lucrative, the only way to survive is to grow coca and sell the coca base to people who buy it. And like there was like this very interesting sort of like ethical component, because people who grow coca often, vilified by I suppose the like maybe people whose family members, have drug issues. But then I think they look into the life of that person, the motivations, of her family, her whole history, how deprived they are in that very remote part of Colombia was very interesting, like an attempt to give a human voice, a human lens to that sort of abstract situation. So yeah, there was it was like a short documentary. It got a bunch of more like drug policy, anti-drug war awards from local organizations, and not local. And by local, I mean the U.S., not in the in Colombia.
Right.
Yes, it was like a endeavor into documentary making for a few years. After which I decided to go back to school.
How was it recording a documentary in Colombia with a coca farmer? Was it dangerous? Was it scary?
It was very interesting. I never thought about it as like a dangerous endeavor. And I think by the time I was doing that, it was Colombia itself. It was like before the last, I think, kind of biggest peace agreement, or like kind of like current stage of peace process, which makes Colombia much safer than it ever was. But so it was quieter. It was not particularly violent, not super peaceful. It was a little bit, I suppose it was a little bit unnerving because like to get there, when I would, travel to film, I would, fly to Bogota, then take another flight. Then I think it's a day-long ride on a jeep through like uneven terrain. And then you arrive to a small port and you have to go like to get to a canoe, and then like canoe for a few hours.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a
fairly remote.
Yeah, it's like a few days trip essentially.
Wow.
to get there. And at some stages, Colombia is heavily, even still now, it's heavily militarized because of all it passed. So like you can see people with military uniform, with arms, like casually on the streets. It's kind of like, it's, fine. It's not normal part of life.
Yeah.
So they would be asked by those kind of patrols or posts. And I guess I had like kind of bleached blonde hair. I was clearly a foreigner. It was like a equipment.
Fit right in.
It was pretty, yeah, I know. It's pretty random. And I guess all times, I've gone there several times, I somehow like managed to convince them that I was just like doing something, I don't know, innocent? I don't know. Somehow like I was led through all those times and it was fine.
Right.
But I do remember hearing like shots, gunshots while staying in those areas because they would, the people I would stay with, my main protagonist, she lived in the mountains, and then the sound travels really well in the mountains. So like I would maybe stay there typically for like a few days with her, maybe like 3-4 days. And like every now and again, like you'd hear like shots at night, and you just, you just hope everything's good. And it has been, but it's certainly been unnerving. But I would say overall Colombia, especially now, is largely much safer than it used to be, and it's a like amazing country with amazing, very hospitable people and great food and everything else it has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. I've been there once in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And in Bogota.
Right. Yeah, I haven't done the Caribbean part. It's still on my to-do list. Colombia has like so much to offer in terms of all this unique, nature sort of reserves and very diverse nature. I think their biodiversity is one of the highest in the world.
Yeah, it's
so
gorgeous.
Definitely worth visiting.
But you didn't have any troubles apart from hearing gunshots?
No.
No one tried to steal your equipment?
No, I guess, I don't know. I always worked with, I had like local contacts. I wasn't just going there cold on my own. I connected through some sort of political, I suppose, political activists in Bogota who had networks in the entire country. So then I would go to the headquarters in Bogota, and like they would give me like exact specific people in the region I would go to. So like I would have people that would like stay with them and, travel with them. I wouldn't just, I would definitely felt supported by their network because it was agreed upon. I didn't just like walk in and be like, well, tell me about your life,
But you came alone or did you have a crew with you?
I did. Well, my crew was local. I just had to find and hire local people. I think the first time I went there, I'm trying to think. I had a producer, but he was in Bogota, so he didn't travel with us, but he like helped me figure out what the equipment we need because those areas are very different. So you need like, there's like clothes, waterproof stuff. You need hammocks to sleep in. You need mosquito nets. You need, chemicals, certain mosquito repellents because mosquitoes are really intense. They're like all these logistics. He helped me like find and buy and landed me some stuff too. And then I found a camera person in Bogota, also through friends and contacts. And I also had like I forgot, like a almost like local person from Bogota too, who traveled with us just to kind of like help organize and translate and interpret because my Spanish wasn't that good then.
Right.
And then after that, I think I was just going just me and camera person, and last time it was like just me because at that point I started filming on my phone because the phone video quality became so good I didn't have to drag my camera.
Which is
so
crazy.
It was like fewer and fewer people would come there. Yeah.
Is this documentary available somewhere? Can people see it?
I need to check because the company that bought it from me a few years ago, they distributed it on a bunch of platforms, including Amazon Prime. But I don't know for how many years. So I think I need to understand what's going on with them because it's possible they distributed it to those platforms for like 2 or 3 years and now it expired. Yet I think the company would still have the rights to this. So yeah, I have to confirm because I've kind of pivoted into, psychology and then psychedelic research, and that hasn't been on the forefront for me. So yeah, I have to check with them and let you know.
So cool. It's like two different lives, really, like two such different experiences.
They're very different. I also did some tall ship sailing in between.
Some what?
While I was tall ship sailing.
What's
like
that?
Tall ship. It's like a
a tall ship.
Sail ships.
Sailing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
While I was, I think, I was still doing my media and documentary filmmaking, but because I was with Greenpeace.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in my high school, I joined Greenpeace as a volunteer. And I've been pretty involved with them on and off. Like I've been on their Rainbow Warrior 2, their flagship, until they now switched to Rainbow Warrior 3. That's more sort of more modern ship.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was part of the Pacific campaign with Rainbow Warrior 2.
What did you do?
Which is in the area kind of like where I lived. So what we would do, we would go to kind of like out in the sea and identify drift nets abandoned by, I think, Japanese, maybe also Chinese, and I can't remember, pirate ships. And so the drift nets, I don't know if you're familiar with their nature, but the idea is that they have this large, long synthetic nets. So once they're there, if the pirate ship feels threatened or there is, maybe like border patrol, they just leave and abandon the net. And then net, because it's synthetic, it never falls apart. It essentially it's like a wall of death. It just like kind of circulates in the ocean and catches everything and everything dies. So it's fish, dolphins, sharks, seabirds, all sorts of creatures. So we would essentially identify those abandoned nets and we would take them out manually. And because the ship Rainbow Warrior 2 was not as modern as the current Rainbow Warrior 3, that's their flagship now, it would take us like maybe 8 to 12 hours to just like manually take out, because like they were like kilometers and kilometers long.
Right.
Take out the net, the entire crew, and then you would like cut out all the dead stuff. I mean, some of it was, like the fish that would just have caught recently would still be alive, but like a lot of it just like dead there for a long time. So we would count how many, items of what species were there to just like estimate the sort of the damage essentially. Yeah, so it was part of it just like taking them out, but part was also kind of like this assessment and calculation. So those were like really long days. You'd be out on deck for 8 hours just
quite
taking
demanding.
it out. Yeah, but that was my first exposure to tall ships, because Rainbow Warrior 2 is a tall ship, was a tall ship. It doesn't exist anymore. And so when later in New York, I was sort of done kind of like wrapping up my career in media, because I've been doing it for so long, I kind of like essentially it wasn't rewarding anymore, because I was, like I've sort of exercised that skill for many years. I was thinking where to go next, and I was considering psychology or urban studies were my main two contenders, I think. And while doing that and kind of like slowly wrapping up my career in media, I was working as a tall ship sailor, an educator, a deckhand at South Street Seaport Museum in New York, which was on the contrary very rewarding. And after a few years of that, I then went back to school for psychology.
Damn. A lot of twists and turns in that life.
Quite a lot. Yeah, no, I know. It's interesting, but it kind of makes sense to me. But I understand it's not a very conventional approach, I suppose.
Yeah, but I like that. It's like
I do too.
My life has been the same. We were just talking about it before we started recording. Try this, try that, do a bunch of different stuff, very different stuff. It's fun.
Do what feels sort of right and enriching in the moment, I suppose. And then ultimately, I feel like it all somehow fits together in most meaningful ways. That's been my experience, at least. How about you?
Yeah, no, the same here. As long as you're doing something that's, reasonable, you're not just like, I don't know, sitting playing video games, just getting high or whatever. But as long as you're doing stuff, doesn't matter. Enjoy it. Have fun. It
definitely was fun. It definitely was, really meaningful.
Yeah.
I hope it was the same for you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have no idea what I'll be doing in 5 years.
I know. That's the thing. And like on one hand, I'm doing my PhD in psychedelic research and it's really meaningful and I really enjoy it. But I also don't know if I would be doing that. I mean, maybe in the next 5 years, maybe. In 10 years, I don't know. Like, we shall see. But I think there is some important sort of, not necessarily survival, like evolutionary value in adjusting to new fields and doing, again, whatever feels right and necessary in the moment. It might not be like, doesn't have to be like necessary by sort of societal pressure or what feels necessary to one, you know. So that's been my approach. And I rarely speak about this because, you know, all those fields I've been in, maybe journalism is like somewhat more open-minded, but it's sort of, it's almost like you need to pretend you're in like this one field and that's all you know, almost to connect with people who are in that state. So that's an interesting sort of anthropological and interesting experience for sure, because you get exposed to all these very different people from very different fields, different values, different everything. And you just like sort of seamlessly transition from one to the other and back. Does that resonate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I always enjoy doing it because then you get involved in like a completely different crew with completely different ways of viewing the world, and you're like, oh wow, this is also a way to operate, which is, I like it. I love that there's such great variation among humans.
And then, like, I think it also enriches you in you know, in many ways, to be able to like have gone there, come back, gone somewhere else, and being able to switch between those realities and values, and kind of connect with people from either, in a, you know, successfully. I think I find it certainly enriching.
Yeah, for sure. When I was growing up, though, like in my late teens, early 20s, I thought there was something wrong with me, because my brother, I have an older brother, 3.5 years older. He knew that he wanted to be a lawyer from, I don't know,
his entire life,
kindergarten, like crazy, like early. He knew he wanted to be a lawyer, and that's what he did. He studied, I don't know what it's called in English, but studied like everything you need to study to eventually become the lawyer, and he did it, and now he's
a lawyer now.
And, you know, this was what I was watching growing up, and I was like, oh, wow, I guess that's how you're supposed to live life, you know? So in my late teens, early 20s, when I still had no idea what I want to do, I was like, what's wrong with me? Why haven't I figured out my calling or whatever?
As clearly.
Yeah, but now, like, looking back, I'm like, oh, God, I would have hated that life. I'm so happy that I did things my way, where I tried a bunch of different stuff and figure things out along the way. Some people are meant to, you know, find whatever it is they want to do, and some other people are different.
Yeah, I think at least reminds me of my uncle. My uncle has always, apparently that's what they told me, he always wanted to be a bus driver. He knew it, so he grew up and he became a bus driver.
Oh, wow.
Go figure. He was very happy. I think now he's doing something else, but it still has to do with driving, like maybe like driving like longer kind of cargo trucks or whatever. But I guess it's a similar example. But I feel like there is, you know, like diversity of approaches. And I think potentially society, and it's interesting because society, you are in is Swedish and I live in the US, right, for the last 15 years. I would say they're different societies, but maybe there's like a common societal thread that sort of presents this somewhat simplistic version of what life, you know, is or could be or should be. So like certain prescriptive, societal, often unhelpful, you know, dimensions, because I feel like so much can get limited and unexplored. But like, think about it, we don't have a societal models where someone has, you know, 5 careers in their lifespan necessarily. I mean, now we do. Now it's very different with, I don't know, crypto and AI and you name it. Everyone is doing everything. But it's very recent, right? So I still feel like the archetypically we have this like sort of image of maybe something like one solid thing you're supposed to do. I do like to think it's changing though, but the example is your brother like really resonates and makes sense. That's why literally I do feel like, depending on whom I'm talking to, I usually present just like one side of my background or one side of me, because there is very few environments where I could just discuss my actual life trajectory and reasoning behind it and my motivations and my values and how they've been changing. So very few examples, and this podcast is one of them. So thank you.
Well, of course. Thank you for sharing. There is, I was listening to this podcast about like creating your own luck, and it had a bunch of tips of like how you can become more lucky in life, like creating creating
I'm
more
dying to find out.
And one of them was when you meet someone and they ask you, so what do you do? instead of just saying, well, I do psychedelic research, for instance, you say, oh, I do psychedelics research. I've also done a bunch of documentaries, and I do this. I'm interested in that. You throw out like 2 or 3 things, because then that increases the chance of the person going, oh, I actually have a brother that's working with this as well. Maybe, you create these fortunate connections.
A little vortex.
They call it like putting out different hooks.
More hooks than you typically would.
Yes,
I like
exactly.
that.
Yeah. I've tried to live like that after hearing that. That's the only tip I remember, though. I don't remember any. Is it
helping you? Are you feeling more? Are you feeling more fortunate?
I mean, it happens every now and then. You say something and someone's like, oh, that's interesting, blah 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 blah, and then you have a new opportunity for a collaboration or whatever.
Right. I feel like that's the only way to truly, I guess, attract people on the same wavelength is to be your authentic self at every moment to the best of your ability, because kind of like then you put out essentially, I suppose, how would I put it? Like, I can say frequency, speaking scientifically, right? And non-scientifically at the same time. Like, you put out the frequency, the true authentic frequency, which then you'd hope attract or kind of resonates with similar frequency. Because if you put out the more limited version or like very narrowed down version of yourself, then that's what you're gonna be able to connect with. But so I see how that advice, I see how that could work. I think it's really cool. Thanks for
absolutely.
telling me.
But I do see the other point of view as well, especially in some of the fields that you've been moving in. I'm sure in academia there's a lot of that, like you say, people need to be fully dedicated to this one thing, and that has been their thing forever. Or maybe that's just a perceived idea that it is beneficial to be that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, because I only know my experience, right? Of course, we all know people who've been persistent and in one field, right? Whether it's academia or psychedelic research or something else. And to each his own. I'm not sure. Like, I can speak for that experience. But also the question is, I think, for me as someone who've experienced different fields and different occupations and different levels of associated reward, the question is, how rewarding is academia? Is it something so rewarding that I would want to spend, next 2 decades of my life in or not? And I'm still figuring that out because I'm still relatively new to it. So I will know in let's speak in a few years. Yeah. Hopefully sooner than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like we said, it's different types of people. I can't even imagine having that kind of worldview where I'm like, oh, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to this one profession or this one field. It's I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Like, honestly, when I transitioned into psychedelic research, which was, I guess, about 7-8 years ago, I felt like at that moment, it felt like that's something I see myself doing for, the foreseeable time.
Yeah.
And it has been those 7-8 years, and I still am doing this, and I see myself doing it for some time longer. But I also, at the same time, my critical thinking is very strong, and I wonder, is it really truly rewarding? Is there societal value in it? Is there kind of like, does it align with my current values going forward? Does it benefit humanity to the degree I would like it to? So I feel like those critical thinking and sort of just overall critical approaches I think are important, and maybe as a society, again, journalistically speaking, we could be in a little bit better place if we utilize them more frequently.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know either. That's the fun part, figuring shit out.
Right, that's what
if you had all the answers, how much fun would life be, right?
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. And wouldn't it be nice to know? I think someone asked me recently, I forgot in what context. If you could know when you die, would you prefer to know or not?
No.
You would not.
No way.
I feel like, I don't know.
You?
I keep going back and forth because I feel like, if I knew, I could, on one hand, if it's very, long time in the future, I could just be relaxed and do whatever the hell I want until then, on one hand. On the other hand, if it's, very soon, then I'd be put my things in order, all my, stuff, prepare my child. So, I feel it's beneficial, but it would feel, I think I would prefer to know, like the OCD part of me, I feel like I would prefer to know, to just like have that knowledge. Whether it ends up being that indeed or not, that's a different question.
So let's say you get to find out and it's in not in the super not super far away, but not really close either, like say 20 years. How would that change your life? What would you do differently?
Oh, that's actually a very good example of like a helpful device, which I was introduced to many years ago by someone, I think, in mental health field. And they said, and I was at like a hinge moment in my life, I think in my 20s, when I was considering whether staying on the island or like kind of moving and pursuing some of my dreams. And I could see pros and cons to staying on the island or staying on the island for a little bit longer, or like all the different options. And they said, imagine you had a terminal illness and you only had 1 year to live or something like this. How would that change your priorities right now?
Right.
And that was really helpful. Or maybe there was like a few steps. It was like 5 years, and it's 1 year, then it's like 1 month. And like, I think now it seems like a little bit maybe kind of hard to connect to that thought. But I guess in my 20s, my mental flexibility was such that I could really feel that. And it was really helpful. I immediately reprioritized things, and I left the island literally like within months. So that's always a good exercise. Highly recommend.
Yeah. It's not a bad idea to think of life that way.
Yeah.
Because no one knows.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. What are you doing in the psychedelic research field? Now, I know you told me about this a few days ago,
right?
But then I had like
you had 22 of those people.
22 of those conversations about projects that are way over my head. So
absolutely. Well, I hope I try to make it like digestible. But maybe I'm not. So that's a good.
You absolutely did. It's all on me. 100%.
No worries. So my current research interests are all in relation to psychedelics, are gender, attachment, developmental attachment, and also to a degree trauma and challenging experiences.
Right.
I'm also currently pivoting into end of life work, end of life research potentially. It just really appeals. But so up to date, I've looked into challenging experiences in ayahuasca use. So we looked at people who used ayahuasca, and we checked how many traumatic events they had in their lifetime, how that correlated with the challenging experiences during acute ayahuasca effects, and how those correlated with post-traumatic growth. Mm-hmm. And so, and we found interestingly that it's not the literature currently, so it's not very well researched. And so the limited bulk of literature on this points in two different directions. So some literature indicates that the more trauma or challenges in life previously would correlate with more challenging events during acute effects, which kind of makes sense.
When you say acute effect, you mean
during acute psychedelic effects
trip itself.
Mm-hmm, of ayahuasca in this case. But in our study, we didn't find this. And our study had a sizable sample of between 160 and 200 people, depending on which measure we looked into. And so we found there was no correlation between traumatic events. There was like different kinds of traumatic events and challenging experiences during acute ayahuasca effects. And also there was no correlation between challenging experiences and post-traumatic growth, which the other part of literature indicates there should be. So I feel like as a field, we need to kind of like get to the bottom of this, because it's one of those, not very clear topics, which for requires further exploration for sure. But it was definitely an interesting study. Another more recent study that I presented on here at Borealis Psychedelic Summit in Stockholm is a qualitative research where we spoke with mental health professionals in the States, licensed mental health professionals who worked with people using psychedelics, and those people would typically use psychedelics for a variety of intentional, usually therapeutic reasons. and a gender piece or gender exploration would come up. And for some of them, they knew there was something about their gender and they wanted to explore. And for some of them, that was not in the picture at all. But then the gender piece would come up and there would be some gender questioning and gender exploration. And a lot of them would then come to identify as a, different gender and change their pronouns and change their presentation and so on. So essentially looked at what are the insights mental health professionals had, were there any patterns in their clients' experiences, everything completely anonymized, of course. What would be maybe helpful advice from mental health professionals? So that was a very interesting study which we presented here. And one more, not directly related, but if you think about it broadly enough, I think it does make a lot of sense, is the paper on attachment, psychedelics and enculturation dynamics, actually written with Per Granqvist here from Stockholm University, who is the head of the Granqvist Attachment and Psychedelics Lab. He was my advisor and senior author on this paper, where we argue that since psychedelics, as we know, increase suggestibility and openness, which also means that attachment orientations, also called attachment styles, become more salient during acute psychedelic effects, and you could argue also in preparation, integration, but especially during acute effects. There's a lot of possibility of a kind of undesired value transmission, a belief transmission, and there is anthropological research that confirms that by David Dupuy in Peru. So essentially we argue that people, like very simplistically, in psychedelic use settings, maybe psychedelic psychotherapy or psychedelic research setting, attachment orientations of both the participant and therapists should be kind of paid attention to, because they will ultimately come into play. And also that whole idea about belief transmission, undesirable, maybe adverse, belief transmission could be very serious. So it's very important, the environment is very important, what language is used, the power dynamic between the participant and the therapist and so on. So we just kind of call attention to these aspects, which often can get maybe neglected or not paid enough attention to in clinical research settings.
Undesired belief transmissions. So if you're my therapist, I might pick up your beliefs even though that was not desired.
To a degree, or how this common topic, what's the setting you provide for a participant in a psychedelic psychotherapy or psychedelic sort of research project? Do you have a Buddha on the wall, or is it Christian symbolism, or is it New Agey? And what if someone is strict Catholic and they come and then this setting is New Agey, and what if based on preparation somehow as a therapist you transmit those New Age values, but then does the participant have even the language of this? Do they have capacity to even understand or receive or be interested in those values? And if they don't, then what do you do? Do you seek a very neutral language, which I think is ideally the go-to? Or do you, maybe we try to find, as a research team, try to find a therapist who is also Catholic to align, speak the same language with the participant? So these are all very tricky questions. And I think each trial solves them in their own way. But the anthropological study by David Dupuy, I was telling you, so he looked into participants. I think they were from all over. Some of them are from France, some of them are from other European countries. International group of participants arrived to a retreat place in Peru, ayahuasca retreat. And I think it's about a week. So they stay there for about a week and they do some ayahuasca experiences. And then there's a daily discourse, from what I remember from David's paper. At the top of my head, I might be wrong with details there. And so the discourse by the sort of main facilitators or maybe the head of the center leads to the fact that while participants arrive, they have very different worldviews. When they leave, they have strikingly similar worldview and conceptualization of their ayahuasca experience.
Wow.
And to some of that, from what I remember, there was heterogeneity. To some of them, that those new worldviews, it did make sense. That new sort of cosmology and explanation of what actually happened did make sense and was beneficial. To some of them, it clashed with their pre-existing beliefs, and they didn't have, the tools to, or not, they didn't want to necessarily completely switch into this new worldview, yet that was the only worldview offered by the center, right? So it could be adverse for people. That
is so interesting. Because symbols are so powerful, especially when you're in an altered state, let's say, and it can bring you back, memories from your childhood where whatever, this symbol symbolizes something good or something bad, and it can be completely different to you than it is to me.
Yes, exactly. And that was, I don't know if you were there, but our panel on the second day in the afternoon, we had a panel on challenge and experiences right after the a paper preprint on traumatic memories coming up during psychedelic effects. And there's always that question of whether are the real memories that were suppressed, or is it symbolism? And then this not having this clarity can be, of course, disorienting and, unhelpful and kind of like disbalancing for people. So yeah, that was a very interesting topic. And then our sort of panel on challenging experiences kind of followed up to that and discussed other challenges too, not just re-traumatization or reoccurrence of traumatic memories, but that in itself is a very, very valid, very interesting topic.
Very interesting. We talked about this during our chat at the summit. It is such a tricky question because psychedelics clearly have so many potential benefits, not just to individuals but to society at large.
Right.
There's so much to be that we could use to better humanity's situation with these substances, but how? And that is such a tricky question. Like, okay, let's say all the science is settled. We know that there's benefits for all of this stuff, the depression or disconnectedness in general. But how do we do it? How do we introduce it in society in a safe way that, maximizes the benefits and minimizes the damages?
Yeah, no, it is tricky. But also, for example, I know just after this conference, I remember that one of the recurring themes is that when people, undergo either a psychedelic retreat or participate in a research, clinical trial, a research event with psychedelics, and then they come out and go back to their real life or like normal life, no one, they've had this potential transformative experiences, and no one in their circle can understand it or has the language for that or has had any experience that's comparable to that. And so then I think that could lead to isolation, in fact, speaking societally, and even like within smaller communities, because like they feel like, they've had this massive experience, a different person, right? They're transformed. How do they integrate it?
and everyone else is like, shut up.
Everyone's like just like doing,
going
about their life. Yeah,
the way they Jesus, get out of here.
It could be a thing. It could be very distressing, right? I can easily see that, how hard that could be. That emphasizes the role of integration, as we, I guess, keep saying as researchers and clinicians, that integration is a huge factor. Absence, presence, the quality, whom you're doing it with, and so on.
What does integration mean in this aspect?
So in this context, integration is, when, again, psychedelic experience, whether it's one's own or in clinical setting and research, ideally, especially in research setting, is preceded by preparation sessions and followed by integration sessions. And the number of each of these sessions, of each type of the sessions, depends on the protocol. But before the psychedelic experience, it's good if the person has at least one preparation session in which, if it's a clinical trial setting, the therapists, first of all, discuss what's going to happen, in what order, how long each part will take, then discuss the potential psychedelic experiences, which is hard to discuss if it's a psychedelically naive participant, because how do you discuss in human language something as ineffable as acute psychedelic effects and all the relations they could lead to, right? So that's a very tricky part. And like, how do you have someone sign a consent form while you can't adequately express in human words the nature of those experiences. Yet we do it every day as a field. We do it somehow.
That is tricky, yeah.
And get away with it. So ideally
you might hang out with God for a while. Do you consent?
Right, exactly. But so there is at least one, usually more than one. It really depends on protocol. Preparatory sessions, right? So then once they feel hopefully to a degree prepared, then there is a one or again more than one dosing sessions where they get psychedelic and they spend however many hours. And then if it's few dosing sessions, then typically in research settings, there is an integration after each dosing session and then like integration sort of after. If it's a protocol with just one dosing session, then they have ideally a few integration sessions in which they can discuss what happened, try to, make meaning of it with therapist's help, and so on, like in detail unpack everything that happened, what implications there are for, their life and their maybe family dynamics or relational dynamics, the workplace situation and so on. And so that's like a good, I guess, recommendable, desirable setting where there is both preparation, dose, and integration. And of course, we know that naturalistically, that's not always the case. People who use psychedelics naturalistically do preparation, integration. Actually, sometimes for integration, people go to a professional, so like they use psychedelics on their own, but sometimes they would go for preparation and integration to their trusted psychotherapist.
Right.
But since the administration in that context may be illegal, so they just use it on their own, and then those two end beats are discussed with therapist, and therefore person is supported.
Right. Yeah, because these things are powerful. You were talking about the gender aspect, and that's one aspect, but pretty much anything that you have going on in your head where you're like thinking about yourself, your identity, your place in society or in your family or whatever, that kind of stuff gets brought up during, what did you call it, the acute
effects.
Acute effects.
Yeah, I mean,
during the experience, and if you're not ready to deal with that, like, man, that can be rough. You have to be prepared to deal with whatever is going on in your head when you enter one of these experiences.
Yeah, but often you might not know what's going on in your head, or often things you couldn't expect that in a lifetime would come up, and so that's why I think that's why what concerns me and I suppose some of us as researchers is our readiness as a field for challenging experiences, especially persistent challenging effects, because while it's typically a relatively small percentage, even in clinical trials, right, it's a small percentage of people who maybe don't derive the benefit they expected, or moreover, maybe get an acutely adverse experience which may persist, and they are not often adequately included in reports, while people can, suffer, for lack of a better word, from this for months and years. This also applies to, of course, naturalistic, use on one's own, or psychedelic retreats, for which the framework is even less established. And so there are multiple accounts, anecdotally, of people, who gone to a retreat, something went wrong, or maybe nothing went wrong, but they just didn't get the benefit and perhaps even get harmed. And then they have to live with that, kind of change for the rest of their life or for several years. And there is very few people, if any, who know how to provide support, because it's very unique, it's very intense, it's understudied, it can go in a multitude of different ways. So and each person then ultimately have to figure out on their own how to continue, living and functioning with that. Sometimes I think people also, seek each other out, kind of share experience, anecdotal accounts and so on, share things that happen, helped one, maybe the other person will find them useful too. Yeah, so there's researchers like Jules Evans and Esenia Cassidy who do focus on challenging experiences in their work, and that's really, really important, because I feel like as a field, when it comes to medicalization, capitalization, like whenever the profit is in the picture, it's very distracting.
Yeah,
as a field, the focus on challenging experiences and specifically persistent adverse effects is is not quite there where I would like it to be. I can speak for myself.
If you were the dictator of the world, you can do whatever you want. There's no shortage of resources. You can reshape the world. How would we be doing this? How would psychedelics be integrated in society? Medical, religious path, something else? Like what would be a good way?
That's $1 million question. Specifically, so one thing we know, again, from research, from, empirical findings, which we as researchers try to prioritize, is that in communities where people use, again, ayahuasca, because that's the example that really comes to mind, Santo Daime, every community, every movement has its own shortcomings and whatnot, but we know statistically that people who use ayahuasca in settings similar to Santo Daime, which is, the community, religion, well, I think depends on whether they consider spirituality or religion, but there's a certain structure and there is community. And we know that the frequency of challenging experiences there is much less, largely perhaps due to the community setting. So I think that would be one good model of operationalizing that in a way that's beneficial. I think there's so many implications. I just don't want to veer off into all the many implications. I think that's one good example we have, and it would be nice to learn more about why it works well and what can we replicate, how can we do it to decrease the potential for challenges.
Right. Yeah, I would absolutely consider community to be such an important aspect here. You mentioned that earlier, like when someone has one of these transformative experiences and then they go back home and they don't have anyone to talk to who understands this.
Right.
That's got to be rough.
Well, in community, yes, they would sort of, support each other and talk. And that's why the more and more interest is paid to group integration or group setting. And some researchers like Christopher, my colleague in Oregon, does psychedelic sort of clinical trials in a group setting. I think they just published recently on this, or about to publish, where you could like see the benefit of that sort of group process and mutual support, which is something that it's hard to achieve in a capitalist society with therapists who are very expensive, but also it's just a different effect. You can't necessarily achieve that effect with one or two therapists, because it's, we're talking a group and group dynamic, which is multidirectional and goes, in many different ways, but is something that's definitely being explored currently. And for, I guess, also financial insurance purposes, people argue that that's the future because, again, when and if, hopefully when, psychedelics are legalized for at least medical use, it will be much cheaper to have group integration than, to pay to those individual therapists, 1 or 2 therapists per individual. So we'll see. And I certainly applaud the researchers like Christopher who do start looking into it.
It also makes more sense to do it in a group setting, I think.
It does.
Yeah.
It's a social animal, right?
Yeah. And to have people, to talk to people who are equals. I mean, talking to a therapist is great and all, but it's still potentially a power dynamic going on there. But if you're talking to other people who have gone through a similar experience and just sharing your experiences with one another, I feel like that's more closely aligned to the community aspect that we were talking about earlier.
I agree. Yeah, and I think people do that naturally. I know there are. I'm aware at least of a couple of groups that I think Zoom groups, they seek out of people who had challenging experience. They seek each other out and then discuss kind of like what supported, what was helpful to each of them, and kind of like try to trade those tricks and recipes of how to kind of navigate those experiences. So it's definitely I think important. I also know there are groups in person, but of course it depends where one is based. I'm only aware of some US events, so it's definitely kind of happening more and more, and hopefully it will be more of a group integration, or in preparation it will be more of like a common feature of these experiences.
Right.
even more in the nearest future.
How are average people in the U.S., how do they view psychedelics? In Sweden, it's still people are very unfamiliar with it. And there's quite a lot of suspicion, I would say, because in Sweden we have our attitudes towards substances in general is there's the legal stuff and there's the illegal stuff. Everything that's legal is fine. Everything that's illegal is the devil.
That's what I hear, yeah.
Yes.
It's of course hard perhaps to be in such a... sounds like stigmatizing.
It's so silly because like if you just look at the history of why certain substances are legal and others are illegal, it's so silly.
Right. It's sort of
it always
random,
has to do with politics.
Random and politics.
Politics, money.
Capital,
Like the psychedelics was to get to the hippies and the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War. That's why they made the psychedelics illegal, to be able to get those people, shuffle them out of the society or whatever. It's like, well, that's silly. We probably shouldn't view that as
as the reason, good reason why they're illegal.
It's
right?
terrible. It's a bunch of these stupid things. But anyway, my question is really like, what is it like in the U.S.? Because I feel like in the U.S. people are more open-minded in some sense when it comes to these things. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think it depends. I certainly, I haven't spoken to all people in all of the U.S. and it's a big country.
Lazy.
There's many states, right? I only have 24 hours in a day. Many states, many cultures, and so on. Some states are more homogeneous. Some states are more sort of diverse. Like it really highly varies. But I would say that in terms of media, we certainly have had, of course, starting from Michael Pollan's book and then the Netflix show and so much mainstream media, and including TV shows and opera, have talked about psychedelics, specifically in regards to mental health improvements, mental health treatments, often in the examples of veterans, which is a, huge bipartisan support, which is a very unique topic on which, all parties agree. And so I would hope that on average, a U.S. person have heard about mental health for psychedelics, perhaps with higher probability than a Swedish person. I also know that in terms of just a recent study, I think drinking is going down in the U.S. I think for the first time in a long time, it's slightly going down, and I think partly because psychedelic use is also slightly increasing, so it's potentially maybe the same. Yes, I think it's two different papers that I've compared, or two different more research. They're not even papers, like research, polls, and so I think that is probably speaking for itself. So yeah, I can't give you exact explicit answer again because it's a very big country, but in terms of mainstream media, mainstream culture, psychedelics for mental health have definitely been paraded and kind of raised and discussed from the highest tribunes by pop culture sort of icons and so on and so forth. So it's interesting that Sweden, you're saying, is kind of keeps its own sort of bubble and keeps. I'm sure it's a generalization as well, and keeps thinking about those drugs as sort of stigmatized thing to do.
We're an interesting country. We're so open-minded in some ways, very tolerant as a culture community. But then there are just some lines you can't paint outside of, and it's rigid in a way that's not the authoritarian kind of rigidity. It's just it's why would anyone do that? What's wrong with you? That kind of rigidity. It's just unthinkable to paint outside of these certain lines.
So I feel then as psychedelic, I suppose, enthusiasts or researchers here, the goal is to kind of understand how do we, what are the good, how do we penetrate that?
Yeah.
In the States, it was again veterans, which is bipartisan, which is a very clear picture, suffering veteran, everyone feels bad for, and so on. So you got to come up with a something similar but unique to Sweden, I suppose.
We need to start more wars. Is that what you're saying?
No, God, no. Absolutely not.
No, definitely not. No. Yeah, we've done an hour. Are we wrapping up? Do you have to get going? Or?
Yeah, I think one non-related to psychedelics thing that is about the my deep connection to Sweden. I was going to tell you is that so as I mentioned, I speak Esperanto, which is a language created by a Polish. I think he was medical doctor. I forgot of what exact was his specialty. Ludwig Zamenhof in Bialystok, and so he lived between. He lived in the times where I think Germany, Russia, and Ukraine were fighting for the same piece of land, and so like I think he saw a lot of conflict, and then he essentially grew up thinking that if we all spoke same language, there'd be like less conflict and less war.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that thinking, as as idealistic as it might seem. So he was a doctor, but he spent most of his life, he had some practice, but he spent most of his life, his effort creating this language, Esperanto. And Esperanto means the one who is hopeful, the one who has hope. And he, I think, even used his wife's inheritance to like contribute to creating this language. Anyway, it's a very beautiful, simple, very logical language. Then he sort of published it in a newspaper. If you want to join club, write to me. And then he sent, I think the first edition of it had it was like one sheet, and it had all the rules on one side and all the word roots on the other. It was like a very, very simple, straightforward, very easy to learn language. And so he shipped that to people learned it, and then they started creating international congresses in Europe where they would meet and speak this language, which is kind of really cool for something that's man-made.
Yeah.
And so it still exists to a degree. It still exists in Sweden, in other countries. And I learned this language in my 20s, and I spoke, and I still speak it. And specifically, we had different sort of youth congresses, and they still happen. I just haven't gone in a while. And so one of those congresses was in Russia back in the day, and my Swedish friends and a bunch of other Esperanto speakers came to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And when at the end of the congress, I was taking my friend to a train to take to Finland, and then he was going to, because he's from north of Sweden. And because we spoke Esperanto approaching the train, the person thought that we were foreigners and just like let us on the train without checking, because he had a ticket and I didn't have a ticket. And once on the train, I almost like spontaneously decided to go to travel with my friend. And I essentially kind of pretty abruptly, all of a sudden, I ended up in Sweden in a summer. And essentially what I did do, I had about, I guess, some weeks or maybe 2 months. Mm-hmm. So we spoke Esperanto, we connected with other Esperanto people. I worked at some of like music festivals up north. I worked with Youth Green Party, doing like patrol. And so like I had a nice like sudden vacation in Sweden.
Nice.
And among other people who speak Esperanto, I met with Amanda Lind, who still lives up north. She was in our circle. She speaks Esperanto, spoke then anyway. And so I really liked her name and I liked her vibe. I don't know if you've seen her, obviously. She's very lovely. And so I had this idea that if I have a female child, maybe I'll consider calling her Amanda, because I really liked Amanda Lind's vibe as my friend of a friend who speaks Esperanto. And so then later I had my child. I kind of like tested the name Amanda. It seemed like it would still kind of, it worked well. So I called my child Amanda. Her first name is, and I was not aware of Amanda Lind's kind of like, I guess they all started from Green Party, my friends and Amanda. And then I wasn't following developments with her. And then a few years ago, my friend from here was visiting me in New York. And, when he learned my child's name is Amanda, he's like, oh, just like how, Minister of Culture. I was like, And who's the Minister of Culture? Amanda Lind. I was like, oh, Amanda Lind, but I know Amanda Lind. I have her on Facebook. Like, it was so funny because apparently during her campaign, I got a bunch of notifications in Swedish, but my Swedish is not that good. So like, I just like ignored them. Like, okay, Amanda is like doing something, some sort of publicity on Facebook, like fine. And I didn't realize she was going for a minister and then was a minister. And yeah, this is randomly how my child is named after Swedish former Minister of Culture. But I still think she has a great vibe. I haven't seen her in a long time. That's hilarious. It was very funny, yeah.
You were like, stop spamming me. What's going on?
I know. And my Amanda is almost 6.
Hey, nice.
Yeah.
That's a cool story and cool connection to this country.
Cool story, bro. Do you know these T-shirts?
I know of the
cool
expression.
Story, bro.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like they like come on T-shirts for some reason.
Yeah, why not? It's a good statement to put on a T-shirt. Well, listen, this has been awesome. I'm very happy that you wanted to come sit and talk to me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So fun. Anything we can do to open minds and expand, do some expansion, some mental expansion.
You've lived a very open-minded and interesting life, that's for sure. And I'm very inspired by it and I appreciate it.
Likewise. I think, we really resonated here. So thank you. Great talk.
Indeed. Hopefully not last time. So we'll keep in touch. If people want to find your research, find your documentaries, find whatever, where would you send them? The best way to get in touch
with me currently is LinkedIn. And from there I can direct further. And on LinkedIn, it's just my name, Esenia Cassidy, Esenia Cassidy. That's me.
It's a very cool name, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
okay. I'll take that.
Sounds like a hero from a Western movie or something.
Oh my God. Okay.
Esenia Cassidy is here.
Okay.
All the bad guys need to do.
That's a great.
Yeah, it's great.
That's a great. Yeah. That's a great conclusion. Thanks.
Indeed.
I did not see that
coming. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Yoshi.
And thanks to everyone tuning in. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Cheers.